Every week, mainstream news networks broadcast alerts declaring that the federal government is burning through billions and the domestic economy is heading toward absolute bankruptcy. Markets experience immediate friction, and the public panics. This reaction stems from evaluating global macroeconomic health using the same metrics people use to manage a personal mortgage. But looking at the database reality of 2026, almost every sovereign nation on Earth operates on a massive mountain of debt. From emerging markets like India to hyper-stable economies like Switzerland and Germany, carrying structural liability is the baseline rule. The headline national debt figure isolates the liabilities of the central government. It excludes the independent debts accumulated by regional economies like California or Texas, and it has no connection to your personal student loans or household mortgages. This raises a practical question. If borrowing is catastrophic on paper, why do the most sovereign superpowers systematically choose to hold trillions of dollars in liabilities? A central government possesses the legal sovereignty to print its own currency. Why does it actively choose to source capital and pay interest to external lenders instead? Look at this Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe note. When a state prints money without corresponding economic output, excess liquid cash floods the market. The currency's purchasing power disintegrates, leading to hyperinflation and absurdities like a $100 trillion denomination. We have watched this process render paper currency less valuable than basic paper waste. In Venezuela, this massive fanned-out stack of bolívares is required to purchase a single chocolate bar. Sovereign borrowing imposes structural accountability. Because legal bonds carry fixed interest rates and lenders demand repayment, the government is forced to manage its budget to meet those specific financial obligations. Central governments seek out this leverage for 4 reasons. First, balancing systemic budget deficits. The cost of funding national security and healthcare continuously outpaces annual tax intake. To avoid cutting services or spiking taxes to the point of corporate strangulation, governments use debt to bridge the gap. Second, funding infrastructure velocity. If a developing nation requires advanced electrical grids and automated shipping ports to compete globally, waiting decades to save up tax revenue is economic suicide. They borrow the capital up front to construct those assets immediately. Deploying that capital into high-yield physical assets accelerates industrial productivity. This expands the gross domestic product at a rate that makes servicing the debt manageable. The third driver is countering macro emergencies. During unexpected global shocks, governments must instantly inject capital to prevent labor market decay, visible on this United States check issued as an economic impact payment. Fourth, servicing maturity schedules. Sovereign states roll over liabilities into new debt instruments. Rather than depleting active liquid cash reserves to pay off a maturing 10-year bond, they issue a brand new instrument to satisfy the old obligation. To see who supports this system, we have to look at the creditor ledger. First is domestic capital. When citizens purchase government savings bonds, they act as direct lenders to their state. At a larger scale, commercial institutions and agencies like the Social Security Administration deploy trillions into these bonds as a foundational, low-risk investment. Next is foreign capital. International investors and foreign commercial banks systematically acquire the debt of stable nations. Superpowers like Japan and China hold hundreds of billions in foreign liabilities on their active balance sheets as a risk mitigation strategy. But if an economy is politically volatile, open markets will refuse its bonds. In total financial collapse, states encounter the lender of last resort, the International Monetary Fund. This emergency liquidity comes with a high cost. The IMF legally forces recipient nations to execute severe austerity mandates, spiking taxes and slashing pensions. This friction is captured here by a protester sign blaming the IMF for destroying Argentina. This institutional lending matrix shows that global capital markets treat sovereign debt as a premier, highly sought-after investment. To calculate when debt crosses into systemic danger, economists evaluate the debt-to-GDP ratio, weighing total public liability directly against total annual economic output. Western superpowers routinely operate well past 100%, because as the economy expands, the liability stays proportionate to active production. Leverage only becomes a trap when a state borrows to cover recurring administrative inefficiencies or interest on old, unproductive debt. As the liability swells, tax revenue is consumed by interest payments, starving public infrastructure of funding. If a nation mismanages this balance and loses market confidence, the system collapses. Sri Lanka's 2022 default triggered domestic hyperinflation and the societal chaos documented in this clash between citizens and riot police. A nation's survival depends on allocation efficiency and economic velocity, rather than the raw dollar amount on its balance sheet. If excessive liability introduces risk, one might assume the ideal is to become 100% debt-free. In reality, that strategy is catastrophic. While anomalies like Macau operate debt-free, They are specialized regions running on localized tourism and casino revenues that outpace the needs of a small population. You cannot scale the mechanics of a gaming territory to fund an industrial superpower. For a major state, reaching zero debt would require either crushing corporate tax spikes or the dismantling of all public services. Both paths would paralyze consumer spending and trigger an industrial depression. This would also eliminate sovereign government bonds. Without those risk-free assets to safely compound wealth, pension systems would be legally forced to reallocate trillions of dollars into volatile equity markets, introducing instability into global banking. National debt provides the underlying structure for modern global commerce. Its value is determined by the strength of the economy tasked with servicing it. Secure your liquidity, hit that subscribe button, and let's master the math of global economics together.